My friends, we sing Canadian themes, for in them we proudly glory. Her lakes, her rivers, and her streams are worthy of renown in story. The author of those words has laid buried in the Ingersoll Rural Cemetery for more than a century, and yet they still ring true. Who was this person? When did they live? Where did they live? What did they do for a living? Who lies beneath these stones? The answers may surprise you. This is Stone Secrets. Let me introduce to you James McIntyre, the Chaucer of cheese, the Milton of Stilton. James was born in northern Scotland in 1827 in the town of Forres. And according to legend, across the road from Donald Smith, who would become a Hudson Bay Company fur trader and later Lord Strathcona, who drove the last spike in the CPR railway in the 1880s. James came to Canada at the age of 14 and apprenticed with his uncle in St. Catharines, working as a cabinet maker and also as an undertaker. There's a connection between Ingersoll and St. Catharines that really goes back to the War of 1812 time period. So it's not much of a stretch to imagine that young James would move from St. Catharines to Ingersoll to start to launch his business, his furniture business in town. Arrived in 1854, started his little cabinet making shop on King Street East. Following year, he married Euphemia Fraser, and together they had 3 children, a daughter, Mary, who died in the 1860s. The eldest daughter was Kate. She went on to become a poet as well, and a son, Alexander, who unfortunately passed away at a young age. Well, James's successful business was located on King Street East, just beside Halls Creek. Today, the Pharmasave drugstore is located on that plot of land. Being Scottish born, he was a natural fan of Scotland's Robbie Burns, and so a lot of the poetry that James would end up writing reflects a lot of the same themes that Robbie pronounced back years before. But James wrote stories of events that happened in Ingersoll and other parts of Oxford County. In 1864, he met and married Anne Williams, who is also here next to James in the cemetery. In 1872, disasters swept through the downtown core of Ingersoll. The entire main street, Thames Street, was razed to the ground by fire that spread from Charles Street southwards to King Street. Probably the only thing that saved McIntyre's business was the natural fire break of Halls Creek. That same creek that had been his savior during that fire of 1872 was not always friendly. The spring of 1891, the creek crested its banks and swept away McIntyre's business. So for weeks afterwards, down the Thames River could be spotted pieces of furniture and even coffins just bobbing up and down through the Thames River. He continued to become most famous for writing poems, and most famously were his poems about cheese. Perhaps his most famous poem is Ode on the Mammoth Cheese. that relays the story of the making of the first successful mammoth cheese in 1866. So as the cheese industry grew and Ingersoll became the market town for all those cheese factories that were popping up everywhere, every 5 miles down the county roads, so did James's phenomenon as documenting this event, attending various meetings of the Cheesemakers Association, being a public speaker at the different events. So he continued to write poetry. Actually, 2 different volumes had been published of his works in the 1880s. So he was quite prolific for an untrained poet. But his free time was also devoted to various fraternal organizations. You can see from his stone that he was a member of the Independent Order of Oddfellows. That 3-link chain represents the Oddfellows, the IOOF. He had been chaplain of the Samaritan Lodge here in Ingersoll for over 50 years. Because he was born in Scotland, he was only a natural to be a member of the Caledonian Society. Described as the best Shakespearean scholar in Ingersoll, he was also instrumental in forming the Literary Society, which then went on to become the Mechanics' Institute, which then led to the creation of the public library system. When he passed away in 1906, he was eulogized by all those who knew and admired him. But it wasn't until 1927 when the editor of the Globe and Mail newspaper published a book called The Four Jameses that he gained somewhat more national notoriety as one of Canada's worst poets. But while he's been belittled and besmirched, McIntyre continues to intrigue and inspire other poets and authors. He was the basis for the James McIntyre Poetry Contest that was sponsored by the town for 20 years. And most recently, he's become a featured character in a new novel entitled Molly of the Mall, set in the West Edmonton Mall in Alberta, of all places. So as a teller of tales, a chronicler of local events, he seems to be the perfect choice for this first in a series of historic videos being produced by the Ingersoll Cheese and Agriculture Museum and the Fusion Youth Center here in town. So we look forward to sharing more of these stories, more Stone Secrets.